on the books at that point, so we could kind of, legitimize that first effort to do it. And certainly, I think it got a good bit of attention. I think it's a really fun way to watch FKTs get made. So I think people had fun with it, and we were able to kind of capitalize on that race aspect of it for sure.
Sure. As somebody who followed along, I appreciate what you guys did. It made it fun to keep checking in throughout the day to see where you guys are at. So I appreciate it. So thanks for doing it that way. So now, you being, from Virginia, you're kind of at a disadvantage with the Adirondack Park in northern New York isn't exactly a quick hop, skip, and a jump. So what did your training look like going into this? You're obviously in amazing physical shape, but of course being out on the trails, and not even just the trails, but getting to understand these specific trails would be a huge part of the strategy. So how did you handle that sort of element?
Yeah, so I had made that initial trip last September, and I spent a little over a week up there and was able to cover a good bit of terrain. I was able to do, most of the Great Range and some of the other twofers that are out there and things like that. And so I had made a decent dent in what I wanted to see then. Mm-hmm. And then with those 2 weeks in July, I was like, all right, this is like Adirondack mountain running camp. I've got to see the rest of what I want to see. And I didn't quite get to see every mile that I would put on the route.
Okay.
But I was able to see a lot. Oh, and actually I did take one other weekend in June. My boyfriend and I came up and camped at Henderson Lake for a couple nights. And that was when I saw the Santas and Cliff and Redfield. And I did a little bit of scouting on bushwhacking that I wanted to kind of scout out too. So that was the third trip I guess I had made. So, I had seen quite a bit of it. I felt pretty comfortable about being able to make route decisions from there. I certainly didn't love the fact that I hadn't been able to cover every mile I was going to hike, but it was kind of, it was what I had to do. So it was, I had to convince myself that was going to be okay and it would be all right. And luckily, Virginia does have, pretty standard East Coast trails. I think the Northeast takes the crown for the ruggedness, like no doubt. But if you know the trails down here, you can certainly find some similar terrain. So, we don't have vast areas where it's quite as rugged as the Adirondacks, but we have a handful of trails that are, and I spent a lot of time on those. I did a lot of just focusing on the vert and the climbing and building that kind of strength. And that was something I could easily do here at home too. I think for when I did the Vermont Long Trail, I was basically up in Vermont for the 2 months prior, I guess, to that attempt. And that was definitely good, but it was also a little bit taxing. I'm away from home and I'm on my own. And, I had my dog with me, but it's just, you don't have the comforts of your own home. So for this, I wanted to make that, 2-week trip to get in a good chunk, but I also wanted to spend some time at home and just be able to be in my own kind of training space where I have everything pretty dialed in here. And so, it was definitely a little bit different, but it worked out. And, I think maybe in some ways the advantages of not being up there too much was helpful because I didn't have too many expectations of, having run those trails a lot and how they feel and things like that. I kind of expected everything to be pretty tough like it always is.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
I was able to see it in that light. So maybe that was a plus.
Cool. So I know you reached out to Jan Welford, and if you're listening,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know who that is. Jan held the men's supported FKT for a good 10 years. So kind of an Adirondack hiking legend. So he helped you plan your route a little bit. And I would have to assume that your route probably changed, evolved from when you first started, or how did that come together?
Yeah, it changed a lot. Jan was super, super helpful. He gave me a lot of information about basically kind of his route, and then which was, to his point, not super helpful because so much had changed really in those 10 years. Right. So,
Sure. On the trails. Yeah.
yeah. And he had just kind of, seen a lot of better options, I guess. So he had worked, I believe, with Ryan to kind of craft Ryan's route. And so I think what he was giving me was a lot of the options that him and Ryan had worked through. And so I had that as a starting point. And, he definitely encouraged me to look at some of the more aggressive aspects of those routes. And so that was kind of a focus for the weeks that I was there to like assess those bushwhacking sections and really kind of weigh those against my own skills and just my own like mental ability to take on some of those larger sections like that. So, in the beginning with his confidence in me and his excitement, I think, for it, like to go aggressive, I had created this like super aggressive route. And then once I started to get up there and do a few sections, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing some of those. Like, that's definitely not happening. So it certainly changed. It changed, probably like 8 to 10 times as I was just playing around with things and figuring out, you kind of want to figure out where the spots you can sleep are, mm-hmm. and then the spots you can have crew access are, and back into, the correct mileage for the day that still gives you the rest that you want. And, so I played with a lot of different combinations, and, Alan out there on its own always throws a wrench into things, I think, no matter how you look at it. So, I've spent a lot of time with the mapping software on the computer, just drawing those trails and kind of playing with the different combinations and calculating driving times and things like that before, eventually I felt like it was obvious to me. I was like, of course, this is the right one. I should have come up with this 3 months ago, but I guess that was the process that led me to it.
Yeah, sure. You eventually settled on the winning combination there. Very cool. Jan Welford seems to be, the mad scientist mastermind behind everybody's FKT attempt. So his name comes up all the time. So it's exciting.
Yeah, no, and he's awesome. I mean, nothing but supportive and helpful and wanting everyone to just get out in the trails and go for it. And that's, when you have someone like that who's done what he's done and thinks that you can do it, it's a great boost in confidence.
Absolutely. And it's always fun to see, everyone wants to continue to see the envelope pushed and see like, what can people do? I mean, that's exciting. That's the sport really at that point.
Totally.
So before we get into the hike, let's talk a little bit about your preparation more. And so for starters, what was your gear like going into this? Obviously you're supported, so you're not going to be having mm-hmm. as much gear on you, but what did you bring with you?
Yeah, so I wanted to carry the least amount that I possibly could. So, and on day one, I really wanted to actually try and not carry any like vest or any sort of pack up top. I just think that it gets taxing to be carrying that kind of weight on my back. And so I'm more comfortable with a waist pack for extended times. And so I have an Ultimate Direction. It's the one that carries just two regular bottles or flasks. And so for day one, I was using that. And I had packed into that, a raincoat and my tracker and some food and, maybe extra hair ties, things like that. But it was definitely pretty minimal. My pacers were carrying the brunt of the load for sure. I was using the newer version of the Ultimate Direction trekking poles. And so there's no spot for those on the waist pack. So, when having those with us meant the pacer was carrying at least my poles, if not 2 pairs of poles for them too. Other than that, it was, just fuel, hydration, and, the basics to keep me going there. I'm a big fan of toe socks. So for foot care and stuff, gear that in that sense, I was wearing Injinji socks the whole time and went through, I think, about 13 pairs of those all told through the time. And I wear VJ shoes. So I was wearing the Max model for 2 of the days and the first 2 days. And then I wore the Extreme model as well. And then I think I switched back to the Max for the last day. but I keep it pretty minimal, I think, I guess, in terms of gear and things like that. And my Pacers definitely had packs full of all sorts of things, would be, just like an emergency blanket, a med kit, all of those types of things that you definitely want with you. And as long as I could go without carrying it, I would. There was a couple times, or a handful of times, I guess, when I was doing some miles on my own, and then my pack was a little bit more full. So like for day 2, I was carrying a Camelback type of just basic hydration pack that has a little bit more room for a 2-liter bladder and some flasks and, the jacket and things like that.
Cool. So now what did your nutrition look like while you were out there?
Yeah, so I'm sponsored by Noon Hydration, and I've used that product for over a decade, and that's definitely my main source for electrolytes. So they actually came out with a new product called Noon Instant, which is a powder, and it comes in like a little sleeve, unlike most people probably know Noon as like the sport tabs that dissolve and are kind of fizzy. And I had intended on using the sport tabs, and then the Instant came out, and I was like, this might actually work better because the cooler temps, at least from kind of what I'm used to training in Virginia, up in the Adirondacks, I wasn't needing to hydrate like quite as much as I thought I might. So I was able to use the New Instant as just kind of a couple times a day, like a heavy dose of electrolytes to give me what I needed. And then the rest of my hydration was also, a calorie kind of dense formula. It's made from a company called F2C Nutrition, and it's called Endurance 5-to-1. And so it's just a 5-to-1 carb to protein ratio drink, but it doesn't really have the electrolyte side of it. So that's why I supplement with the Noon Hydration as well. But that Endurance 5-to-1 product is definitely the mainstay of my fueling. If I firmly kind of believe that if you keep just a baseline of that kind of coming in, you stay pretty steady and strong the whole day. I don't necessarily think it's a great thing for like super high intensity activity, but for this kind of thing, it's pretty spot on. And my goal was to be taking in about 300 calories an hour while I was moving. So most of that was coming from the F2C, but there's definitely limitations with the Adirondacks and the crew access and stuff. So we couldn't necessarily carry all of that. I was able to take some in powder form, but it just wasn't realistic to like have all of it be F2C this time. So I also had some spring energy gels, which are, I like the ones, the speed nut and the coffee ones are both 200 to 250 calories in the little pack. So you get a lot of bang for your buck with not carrying too much there. And then I came up with the Nutella roll up, which I'm sure I'm not the original creator of that, but I was just dumping Nutella into a tortilla and rolling it up and taking that out. That you can get about 500 calories into one of those.
Classic backpacking snack for sure.
And you never really want to turn down Nutella. So that was a pretty safe bet. And then I'd say just the standard with, some candy, jelly beans, sour things, just to offset any other cravings. But kept it as simple as I could really, and didn't have to waver from that too much. It was pretty much the same plan I had on the long trail, which had worked well. So I was able to stick with that.
So now how did you and your crew determine the logistics? Because obviously a supported task like you're doing, the crew is vital to succeeding. So how did you guys plan who would be here at this point? You're going to be here at this point. How did you guys kind of formulate that plan?
Yeah, I basically crafted the whole thing. I'm like famous for the planning side of things. I think it's super, super important. And especially, bringing in a crew that's not like all living in the same town prior to this, where we could all get together multiple times and kind of create it. I just wanted to do as much as I could to make sure everyone felt confident going in, that they knew the plan. And so to do that, I basically created a binder, and I had a plan for each person for each day that kind of detailed what they would be doing, to the point of it included, what they would pack in their